Whether you operate one forklift or thousands, one location or hundreds, the new My Toyota customer portal can help you optimize your operation and material handling equipment. This one-stop, free-to-use platform is designed to help you take control of your information and make smarter decisions, all at the touch of a button. Register and access your data today at my.toyotaforklift.com. That's my.toyotaforklift.com.
The New Warehouse Podcast, hosted by Kevin Lawton, is your source for insights and ideas from the distribution, transportation, and logistics industry. A new episode every Monday morning brings you the latest from industry experts and thought leaders. And now, here's Kevin.
Hey, it's Kevin Lawton with the New Warehouse Podcast, bringing you a new episode today. And on today's episode, I am joined by two guests. I have Michael Marcum. He is the general manager at Bastian Solutions, and Matthieu Ebert, director product and technology at PULS Wireless. You may remember Matthieu because he's been on the podcast before under Wiferion's name. And we're going to talk a little bit about that change and get into that. And we're also going to talk about how Bastian has been using the wireless charging solutions in implementations for their customers and what that means for our industry and utilizing AGVs and AMRs for longer life cycles and also different power management challenges that we have seen in the past in our industry and still currently as we come up with new solutions for that. So Michael and Matthieu, welcome to the show. How are you guys?
Great.
Doing well today.
Thank you, Ken.
Good to hear all around. So I think before we dive into anything, because this is kind of recent news, I mean, Matthieu, why don't you talk to us a little bit about the Wiferion, PULS Wireless change, purchase, whatever you want to call it. Tell us a little bit about what's happened there.
That's a very good description, Kevin, whatever we want to call it. So let me help you, or let me help our listeners to just get up to date on where we are today, because there's been a lot of rumors in the media and so I think we need to rewind into June this year if we want to get clarity to this topic. So maybe let's just rewind to January this year. So in January, we launched the US subsidiary of Wiferion North America. This is where our engagement with the North American market and with Michael and his team basically really picked up pace. And in June this year, basically Wiferion, the mother company, Wiferion GmbH out of Germany, was acquired by a large American corporation. And from this time on, basically, we nearly disappeared from the landscape because we simply were in a phase where we had to revisit our business model and our offering to the market, etc. And it turned out that the buyer of Wiferion GmbH has no significant interest in what we call like the industrial business of Wiferion. And therefore, in September, the acquisition of what we call the industrial business of Wiferion was prepared. And by the 1st of October this year, the German company PULS Electronics acquired the industrial wireless charging business of Wiferion. And this is an important differentiation because the initial buyer is more into EV business, and basically Wiferion has been more or less split into two business units, and the industrial one now, of which the whole AMR and material handling world was aware of, is now in the hands of PULS. And maybe a couple of words regarding PULS. PULS is a company which is in personal ownership since 42 years by a gentleman called Mr. Erdl in Germany, who founded this company by himself, and he's the market leader in industrial DIN rail power supplies. So he is basically, he and his company have been focused on stationary power supplies. And now this acquisition is basically bringing into this group mobile energy supplies. So the whole portfolio of this company is now been basically rounded up. And PULS is becoming, by this acquisition, let's say, a major player in industrial power supplies, overall mobile and stationary. And PULS has a subsidiary in the States, in Aurora, close to Chicago, with over 20 people. They have a facility, they have subsidiaries in China, in Singapore, in whole of Europe, are completely vertically integrated in terms of R&D, manufacturing, and distribution. And this is a huge step for the Wiferion product line to now be embedded in such a corporation who has the potential for the next, basically, stages of growth. And by today, we can refer to Wiferion's product because the brand has been taken over.
Okay.
But it's PULS is owning the whole technology by today.
Got it. Very interesting. And I think it's interesting to like, as you said, it's completing that portfolio of kind of power solutions there. And I think it'd be interesting to see how that partnership or marriage, I guess, in a sense, it continues to grow and evolve the technology. So really interesting stuff. And we're going to talk a little bit about the technology today too, as it relates to, as you mentioned in there, AMRs and being able to utilize that for power management solutions. But we also have Michael on the show here from Bastian as well. And we've never had Bastian on the podcast before, actually. So Michael, why don't you tell us a little bit about Bastian Solutions and what it is that you guys do?
Hey, thanks, Kevin. Yeah, for me, I started my career at Toyota in 1997, and in 2017, Toyota had a vision to expand our reach into more advanced logistics, meaning robotics that are in material handling space. We were already the world's largest manufacturer and distributor of industrial equipment, forklifts, tuggers, class 1 through class 6. But we really had a relatively small presence in the advanced logistics sector, such as ASRS, or automatic storage and retrieval systems, conveyor systems, complex material handling solutions like end effectors on 6-axis robots or 4-axis robots. There was just really little presence in that space. So in 2017, Toyota decided to create a new umbrella company called Toyota Advanced Logistics.
Okay.
And they went out and made a couple of acquisitions. The first acquisition was Vanderlande in the Netherlands.
Yeah.
And the second one, and really in the same month, really, was Bastian Solutions. And that's how Bastian Solutions started as a private company and the kind of family owned and family run. And their culture was just a perfect fit for Toyota. It was very much, I mean, it wasn't a Toyota company in every sense, but it had so much of a great culture already, very customer oriented, very focused on continuous improvement. And with all of those basic tenets in their culture already, it was really easy to merge that culture into the Toyota culture. So that's how Bastian fits into that. When we acquired Bastian, they were doing roughly around $240 million a year. And just since 2017, last year, we closed out at over $740 million. Nice. So a lot of growth in that sector. And that's because we knew the industry was moving there. And we felt like, again, very much just similar to PULS and Wiferion's relationship, we knew that Toyota could really help accelerate what Bastian was already doing. So at that time, I worked for Toyota Material Handling USA. And we moved our AGV group into the Bastian Solutions team so that we could develop faster and quicker, get it to the market quicker than we could in our organization, because the Bastian organization was very agile. And so it was a perfect fit. It's turned out to be a win-win for both companies. And it's not always the case. Sometimes mergers don't go well or acquisitions don't go well. Yeah. This one's been amazing.
All right. So very interesting and definitely great to hear that background. I wasn't aware of all that. I've been aware of Bastian Solution, but I'm very interested to hear about that relationship there. So really good. And a lot of, I guess, acquisition merger talk in the beginning of the conversation here. So very interesting stuff. So, I mean, Michael, from your perspective, from the Bastian perspective, obviously, because you're an integrator, you're implementing different solutions Solutions, automation. You mentioned AGVs in there for your customers. And I'm curious, what are you seeing, I guess, in the market right now that's most frequently kind of being requested or customers are looking to in order to improve their operations right now from like an automation robotics side?
We'll be back after a quick break.
You hear a lot about supply chains these days, because if the past couple years have taught us anything, it's that an efficient, well-managed supply chain is absolutely critical to keeping businesses successful and consumers happy. I'm Will Haywood, and I host a podcast called All Business, No Boundaries, where we talk about supply chains, how they work, what happens when they don't, and the innovations that are redefining what's possible in the world of logistics. Join me for insightful interviews with thought leaders and industry experts. We discuss how optimizing supply chains can break down the barriers that are holding businesses back. That's All Business, No Boundaries by DHL Supply Chain. Listen and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.
That's a great question. There's probably several different answers to that. First of all, would say that we've put a lot of effort into developing a corporate development team at Bastian Solutions, and they actually stay dedicated to market research and to try to not just research the market, but to literally talk to customers, have these deep conversations about precisely what they're looking for. But I can say in general terms, we work to support two major segments in the marketplace: the manufacturing segment of the market and the warehouse and distribution segment of the market. Those are kind of our core areas of functionality. And it's easier to say that AGV, AMR, IMR, a lot of different terms out there, but these autonomous vehicles, it's easy to say that they have much more adoption and more presence in manufacturing. That's an easy statement to make. I think that wouldn't be controversial at all. But there is an enormous hunger in the warehousing and distribution market to see that grow. And the challenge that we find in that market is that, unlike manufacturing, especially if you think about manufacturing like automotive and tier one suppliers, that's a pretty large segment of our manufacturing world. Maybe it's agricultural manufacturing where they're making large, agricultural implement equipment. They're already spun up towards robotics. They have some already present. They have maintenance teams, infrastructure. They have a tool crib and parts. They have spare parts cribs on site. They're just ready for adopting more automation technology. So it's much easier to take it into those environments, train them specifically on your technology, and they can just take it and run with it. But when you go into a warehouse and distribution center, there you find that there is some maintenance. I'm not saying there's not, but they typically farm out their industrial equipment to maintenance to like dealers or, equipment dealers and this, I think, creates a big challenge for us to bring AGVs into that marketplace. How do we help them develop the infrastructure they'll need to keep their systems running with on-site personnel? Because of course, we'll supply back-end support, but you need boots on the ground. You need people right there in your operations daily to keep the system running. And I think we're going to see a huge growth in warehousing and distribution. I'm confident of that. Yeah. But I think it's going slower than many people predicted, mainly because of that infrastructure issue.
Very interesting. Yeah. I think it's interesting because, like you said, typically, a distribution operation, fulfillment operation, the most industrial equipment they might have at some point is forklifts, right? And like you said, they're going to, source that out to dealers to do that, or a company that's going to come in and when there's an issue, fix it and, leave basically. So, and I've been through a situation where we brought in automation and warehouse ASRS system, and, they're asking the company, it's a smaller company and they wanted to go big on tech, and they're like, what are you doing about maintenance? And they're like, oh, we have this guy that's, a handyman that we have around all the time, right, for the facility. Like, we can just teach him. And was way, way, way over his head. Really nice guy, but it was way beyond what he had ever done. And, then all of a sudden they had to scramble and figure out what is the maintenance plan for this thing that's, has all these shuttles going around and all these different things, that we've never dealt with before. So, it's a interesting point that you bring that up. I think it's really, really something that needs to be looked at. And I think, like you said, there is a big hunger in distribution operations for that automation, but it is like, infrastructurally, like how do we make this happen and make it make sense so that, the user doesn't end up bringing automation and say, like the automation is not working out the way I thought it would, because we haven't really built that foundation. So very interesting there. I'm curious, when you're looking at this and seeing some of the challenges around maybe older implementations and things like that. And when we look at the power management of that, we're going to talk a little bit about the wireless charging solution from the Wiferion product today. But I'm curious from, if we look at prior to how wireless charging has come into the market, what are some of the challenges that you've seen there in either from a design perspective or from a customer perspective of kind of managing the power of those automated solutions?
Yeah, two things come to mind quickly for me is the first and foremost is the customers don't like the maintenance, the wear aspect of a contact charge system. And that's traditionally what we've been using for quite a number of years, where we have a physical set of contacts on the vehicle. We have a stationary set of contacts somewhere on the floor, or maybe it's vertical on a stand. And we drive by and we basically swipe or rub those contacts together. And once we stop in position with those contacts touching, we can transfer power. And that creates the wear item that customers, that they just don't like it. They don't like having to, their preventive maintenance programs typically are struggling to actually stay consistent in preventing, like going through every 6 months or every, periodic checking it, repairing it, replacing it. They typically wait till it fails. And then you have a catastrophic failure. And then they're scurrying around, and maybe they don't keep parts in the parts crib like they should. So wear items, first and foremost, I think are the number one thing customers don't like about the old charging solutions. The second thing I think they didn't like about it was each company would develop its own approach towards keeping it safe. And what I would mean by that is that when you have a battery connected to two contacts, or maybe there's more than two, 3 or 4, but when you have those batteries connected to those contacts, how do you prevent current from flowing backwards out of those contacts to something that it could short to? And so safety teams were always keenly digging into how did you solve that problem? And some companies would put large contactors, which are very difficult and large because they're DC contactors. Some companies would use large diodes to prevent backflow. But whatever your process was, you had to have a way to prevent that from being a safety risk. And then you had the same problem on the stationary side. So when the vehicle's not present, how do you make sure there's no current, especially high current, available to short circuit out? So with Wiferion's approach, right, and the inductive market in general, but their approach just takes all of that problem out of play for us. It's a clean solution where I don't have wear items. I don't have to worry about the safety risks of open contacts or anything like that. There's really no short circuit protection issue in that regard. Really, the only issue would be that if you tried to force something physically between the coils while they're actively running. And, really that the way it works, that's the very low risk, very low possibility. I'm sure Matthieu could expand on that more.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's a good tee up there for Matthieu. So, it's great to hear kind of that foundational and baseline of, some of the challenges that people have had around this previously. And I think it's great to highlight not only from the maintenance aspect, as you mentioned, but then also the safety aspect too, which I think is really important, especially when we're dealing with power, because, we are dealing with high voltage stuff, and, we could have some serious issues if things are not working properly. So Matthieu, let's turn it over to you and kind of talk to us about, first talk to us about the Wiferion solution for people that are not familiar, and then tell us how it kind of addresses some of those issues that Michael pointed out from previously.
Yeah, so I try to keep the product talk short because Michael has really raised some very, very, very interesting points I'd like to comment on. Our product portfolio is basically pretty simple. We offer a family of wireless chargers, and a wireless charger always consists of a stationary unit, which is a bit like, which could be considered like a docking station without docking technically. And on the other hand, you have like a receiving component, which is installed in the vehicle. And the basic principle is in the end that the power is transferred over the air without all the restrictions of needing to contact. I'd like to keep it generic at this point because people can look up our product lines on our website or reach out to us. Sure. I'd like to pivot to the motivation, why it makes sense to move towards such technologies. And from what Michael just describes, I have two key points which I think are really relevant today, but will become even more relevant in the future. The first point is if you look from an AMR OEM perspective, a machine builder, if we think where is the value generation at an AMR OEM, the value generation is basically in making a machine which is able to deliver some, let's say, material handling or logistics services, which the customer is valuing. The problem with customers is that they don't value some robust or fancy charging or power management technologies. They simply expect them. They simply expect the machines to be driving electrically. And the point is, an AMR OEM, all the effort they are investing in making this energy supply smarter, safer, etc., is not really being valued because the customer simply expects it to work. So if you invest a lot of effort in some smart DC disconnectors and some protections and whatever, in the end, you will not be able to do a significant markup to it because this is not the value what the customer reached out to you. The customer reached out to you to move pallets from A to B. So what we offer is more or less a plug and play kit, which takes away all those problems for the AMR builder and allows them to focus on the tasks where they're generating value. Smart navigation, complex, let's say, load handling, etc., etc. And we have proven in many business cases that for the AMR OEM, it is way cheaper to invest in our technology than to invest in own developments. This is the AMR OEM perspective. So we simply take care of it in the end. Yeah. One good example is Michael and his team didn't start to develop a LiDAR. They could have developed a LiDAR. They could have reached out to university and started to develop LiDAR technology. No, they just bought it because in the end, their value generation is not localization. Right. Their value generation is material handling. Just an example. The second point is about the necessity to design robust solutions. On my last presentation, Promat, I tried to emphasize on the point of stop scaling the problem. This was the headline of my talk. What I mean by that is a typical AMR OEM starts with the design of one idea. I don't know, how many CB18s have you sold this year, Michael? Less than 100, I guess. Or deployed. Yeah. So what we see is different cycles of deployment. We see an AMR builder building one robot as a prototype. Then they build 10, they drive in-house as a 0 series. The numbers, don't nail me down on 10 plus minus 2. It's the order of magnitude. Right. Then you do your first project with, let's say, 20 to 50 robots. And then you start to scale significantly. What is happening in reality is the following. In the lab scale on the prototype, you don't experience significant charging contact issues because you don't have a lot of charging cycles. You focus on other stuff than charging. So the development teams don't see problems in charging contacts. Then they run 10 robots. 10 robots will still not generate the number of docking cycles for which the machines are built in the future. So basically, they still don't see a real problem with charging contacts. Then the first one starts to fail and somebody raises the question, hey, maybe we should investigate this. And now comes the point where the smart OEM differs from the do-it-yourself OEM. The smart one realizes, hey, let's not invest our valuable R&D resources in fixing this problem, which we could simply buy. And the other one starts to engineer charging contacts. And what is happening when they start to do their first large project with, let's say, 100 AMRs? The smart OEM has basically discovered the problem and has fixed it by purchasing a robust solution, and they don't scale the problem. The other OEM starts to tweak the contacts and try to find some peripheral circuits and auxiliary hacks, whatever. And maybe in the 0 series, they are able to fix it. And then they do their first large project. And they basically scale the risk and the problem. And what I'm trying to say with this little description is a robust charging technology is not recognized on small scale. It is recognized on large scale. And this fits exactly to what Michael has just described, that we are basically together pushing AMR technology in industries like warehousing, fulfillment centers, which are in the end low-tech industries. They are using, let's say, forklifts, industrial trucks, and now they start to use way more complex technology like AMRs. And the second dimension is it's more complex and more vehicles. So basically, they are scaling the problem to the power of 2. So what is the logical consequence of this? The solutions have to become more robust, and a lot more robust, because you have less skilled people handling a larger number of vehicles. And it's not as easy to outsource the maintenance of an AMR fleet than it was possible to outsource the maintenance of industrial trucks. So let's say, in summary, bottom line is AMRs are basically moving into industries where the skill level of the labor is simply not suited for the complexity requirement. And in the end, you need to look into more, let's say, I like the overall keyword of robust, because robust implies, for me, maintenance-free. Something which is maintenance-free allows, let's say, a seamless or let's say robust operation in general.
Yeah, very interesting and very interesting way to discuss the problem and how to address it, and then at what point it really becomes a problem, but that you want to foundationally put a solution in place before you get to that scale, as you mentioned, and you scale that risk and scale that potential issue. So, I mean, it's very interesting, and I'm curious, you mentioned in there that it's sort of a plug and play solution. So, I mean, I'm curious if people are listening and maybe they've had some of the issues that Michael mentioned. I mean, are they able to easily take the Wiferion solution now and, as you said, like plug it into place and kind of get rid of some of those maybe maintenance issues or concerns that they've experienced from having something implemented for a while?
So my experience, I've been with Wiferion, or let's say the predecessor company, Blue Inductive, later Wiferion, since 2018. And I would say I've been speaking to roughly 150 AGV OEMs over the last 5 years. And at first, when you talk to OEMs or to mechanical design teams, charging contacts always sound very simple to install. In the end, they're just a piece of hardware which needs to be bolted somewhere. The reality, and I got plenty of anecdotes which we could share today, but it doesn't make the reality is it is not as easy in the operations as it was initially assumed. And we have sold 8,000 systems by today. I think this is proof enough that there is a pain and a demand for a better solution. The question on how easy it is to implement is, in the end, it's a design job. I mean, when Michael and his team started to build their robots roughly 2 years ago, I think it all started. If you know the company, if you know the vendors in time, you can just plan how to design the components in. I mean, you also provide space for a SIG scanner somewhere. Yeah. So if you have done your discovery jobs, your discovery work up front on trade shows and have talking to customers, a lot of our customers do not design our technology in their first robot when we meet them. They design it in the next robot because then they know about it. And if you know about it, you can prepare the space for the components. You can get enough, let's say, recommendations on how to do the wiring and the software integration. And I would say today, if a robot vendor reaches out to us at the right stage of the development and the window of opportunity is good, it is the same integration effort than with other, I would call it like electronics components. It's not more complex than something else. And I would even say, I can't, of course, speak from experience because I haven't integrated it in our own robots, but I would even say that it's less complex than designing a docking station for contacts, et cetera, et cetera. So we like to use the term plug and play. What does plug and play really mean? I mean, I would rather call it like bolt and plug, but the reality is the process is select, design in, connect, commission. Yeah. And we have plenty of experience with accompanying or let's say, supporting AGV or AMR OEMs in the integration of our components. We have a very thorough onboarding process, and the simple numbers of units which have been installed prove that this is working as other components are being integrated. So plug and play is a marketing term, but there is some work to do, obviously, but it's not more than with other components. Yeah.
So, I mean, I guess in that sense, and maybe this is something maybe Michael or Matthieu could answer. I mean, if you look at, because Michael mentioned some of the maintenance issues there that you would see over time. If we have someone, that's listening or someone that has an operation and they've implemented AMRs or AGVs and they've been experiencing some of those issues that Michael mentioned. I mean, is this something that can go and replace an existing power infrastructure that's already been set up? Or is this something that really only kind of fits at this moment into like a greenfield type of solution?
I think it can be retrofitted. That's an easy thing to say is possible. Yeah. But as in all integrations, the devil's in the detail, right? You do need to plan well, consider, like Matthieu said, what's the physical mounting location. And then I would say the next challenge, and it's one that Matthieu just touched the edge of, but when you're integrating a charging solution, if the charger and the solution of power transfer is, say, from Wiferion, and you're using that, what's the storage source, the energy storage solution? Whose battery do you have on your vehicle? And that creates, it's just a design question. Matthieu hit on this. It's just design work. But you do need to do that design work up front. So for instance, if this was a lead acid battery, can you work with that OEM of that storage solution to give you the right charging profiles so that you can set those parameters correctly when you're setting that Wiferion system up? If it's a lithium battery, now it's even a little bit more complex because now you typically have a BMS on your battery and you need to communicate with that BMS. So who is going to communicate? Is it going to be your vehicle manager talking to the BMS and then your vehicle manager talks to Wiferion? It's design work. It's definitely not rocket science, but it is work that has to be done up front. And so as long as you do your pre-work and your design work has a good flow to it, like you've provided all your design engineers the key constraints and the key components that have to interface with each other, your design teams will be able to do this well. And the one thing Matthieu's got spot on is that at least all of the complexity of the charging transfer and the power transfer, they've solved that problem for you. So you get to buy that solution. It's robust. It works. You can put it on your vehicle. Is there more to it than that? Well, yes, but that part of it is, I think, what our industry the OEM industry would embrace. We would say, well, that is our responsibility. We're designing mobile vehicles. We're responsible to make sure that all these components interface well to each other.
Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's we always call it like the homeworks of the OEMs, and often we underestimate the effort, and we ask ourselves, well, why don't they? I'm talking about like retrofits, for example. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, if you go and have a look at specifically Toyota manufacturing plants, they use their own AMRs or AGVs, actually, the Toyota Mouse, and you see like really hundreds of them. And we always ask ourselves, why do they keep operating them with those charging contact solutions, which are wearing down, etc.? And we have looked into retrofitting a couple of those vehicles on requests of users. And technology-wise, it's really a no-brainer. I mean, they run a lead-acid battery or a lead gel battery. You could simply do a dumb CV profile charge, but the integration mechanically is often tricky because no cavities or no volumes have been basically reserved or kept spare for our components. So, 20 years ago, when such a project was deployed, nobody thought, hey guys, let's keep a little space here for in 20 years when something better will come to the market. So in the end, I think the trade-off here is not how willing an AMR OEM or a user is to do his homework. I think the question is, how big is the pain? Because we all know if the pain, or let's say the cost in operations is high enough, they will invest to do the retrofit. So we are basically, in many cases, we are, let's say, on the edge, I think, where one more AGV would need to fail so that the user or the operator would say, come on, now we invest in a proper retrofit. But often the systems are like good enough. The operations teams are, let's say, able to keep it running, keep it alive just about. And so they rather tend to wait for the next investment cycle to purchase a new fleet than do retrofitting. But technically speaking, I think there would even be the chance for a good ROI, because if you look at OEM operations and maintenance costs on large fleets, they typically have dedicated staff just to keep the fleet running. So I'm not saying to get rid of this staff. I'm just saying like reallocate them to some smarter jobs than keeping fleets running. But in the end, the brownfield business needs to be assessed case by case. And this is the big difference to the greenfield business, where we can simply apply our, let's say, design in and deployment program, where we help the OEM to get it designed in a very streamlined way. So there's no real right or wrong here. Technically, both are feasible. The greenfield is, let's say, more economic from a doing perspective. Yeah.
I see. Okay. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I think it's really interesting, kind of that balance there too, that you mentioned of, the investment cycle is coming. Do we try and retrofit this to fix it, or do we just replace the fleet at that standpoint? Right. So, I mean, I think it's really interesting, and it's been great to talk to you both about this. And because I think the wireless charging technology, I mean, I think is, for me, and in my perspective, I think it's like long overdue for the industry, right? I mean, we look at, some wireless charging things that we have in our everyday lives, and it makes total sense to be able to bring that into the industrial setting as well, to do it on these larger vehicles. And I think it's a great thing that's going to push forward to be able to have better power management and address a lot of those issues that Michael said were kind of things that have been in the industry for a while, and challenges that people have had on that side, and having, a good solution from a safety aspect too, which Michael touched on from Wifirion's perspective, makes a lot of sense too. So it'd be interesting to see how this continues to evolve and how it continues to go into the long term and change the way that we look at implementations and designing things, and being able to better manage those power needs and power solutions that are needed around the designs of these overall implementations. So I want to thank you both for coming on the show today and talking to us about this. It's really, really interesting to get kind of this in-depth look and see from both perspectives, from the Bastian perspective and and from the PULS Wireless Wiferion perspective as well. So thank you both very much. So if people want to learn more about what you guys are doing, I guess, Michael, why don't you tell us the best way to learn more about Bastian Solutions?
Well, bastiansolutions.com is, pretty easy website to remember. It's all, pretty extensive once you get on our website to look at very specific things you might be interested in. Maybe maybe you want conveyor, maybe you want ASRS, goods to person technology, shuttles, AGVs, AMRs, whatever your automation material handling need might be. That's a great place to go and just kind of spend some time looking specifically at what you need. If you I don't want to do the homework, I need somebody to help me. Yeah. Then go into that website, you can log a request and they will immediately follow up with you in your specific area of need. Great team of sales professionals who will not try to sell you something, but will listen to what you need. And we'll either say, hey, we've got really great ideas and ways to help you with that, or we don't really have what you're looking for, but maybe we can help you with suggestions of where you could go to find what you need.
Okay, great. And how about you, Matthieu? How can we find out more about PULS Wireless and the Wiferion solution?
So basically, PULS is a global operating company. So if you just go on pulsepower.com, this is basically a central landing spot. You can also go on at wiferion.com and place a request. It will be redirected to the sales representative in your area. There is a US team which is based out of Chicago in Aurora, who will then take care of the North American basic business, which I guess this is mainly people listening to this podcast are in North America. So have a look at Pulse Power Inc. And this will lead to a pretty fast outreach, I guess.
All right, great. And we'll definitely put both of those resources at thenewwarehouse.com as well, so people can easily find them. So Michael and Matthieu, thank you so much for coming on the show today and talking to us about wireless charging technology and kind of what's happening in that space and what people can expect and how they can address some of the challenges that they've had around power management in the past. So thank you very much for your time on the show once again.
You've been listening to the New Warehouse Podcast with Kevin Lawton. Subscribe and check us out online at thenewwarehouse.com.
Thank you for listening to this episode. If you want more content from the New Warehouse, check out our new video series called All Hands on LinkedIn. Just search for the New Warehouse on LinkedIn and follow along.